Hello, my name is Ida. In today's video I will be explaining what a holding company is and how it typically operates in Denmark. A holding company is defined as a limited liability company that primarily owns shares in other companies. The companies that a holding company owns are called operating companies. A holding company in Denmark can be structured in a form of, for example, an APS or an AS. A sole proprietorship cannot be a holding company. Usually, a holding company is not registered for VAT, and there is really no other activities than just managing the ownership of other companies. It is not relevant how many shares the holding company owns in other companies in order to be considered a holding company, but tax rules will differ greatly depending on how many shares a holding company owns. Do you need to include the word holding in the company name? No, a company is considered a holding company regardless of the company name. What matters is the scope of the activities. What type of income will the holding company typically have? First, dividends received from the operating companies, and secondly, profits when selling shares in other companies. What type of cost will the holding company typically have? Typically, the only costs are for the accountant and banking fees. But there can also be losses coming from shares that decrease in value or losses from selling shares. How much tax is paid on profits? A holding company in Denmark pays 22% in company income tax like any other limited company. However, profits that come from selling shares in other companies usually will be tax-free. Also, special tax rules apply for dividends. On daniaaccounting.com you can find a blog about company income tax and dividend tax. What are portfolio shares? If a company owns less than 10% of another company, we call the shares it owns portfolio shares. Special tax rules apply for portfolio shares relating to privately held companies. In general, 70% of dividends are taxed, but profits from selling the portfolio shares are tax-free. Here you will see how profits and dividends are taxed. When you have to present the shares owned in the annual report, you can choose to present the value of privately held companies as the actual buying price or as the inner value in the annual report. Suppose you use the inner value method, then each year. In that case, the value of the shares is adjusted in the annual report of the holding company to represent the value shown in the annual report of the operating company. If the shares have increased in value, the income will show in the holding company's annual report even though the shares are not sold yet. If you decide to show the value at buying price, the profit will be shown once the shares are sold or when a dividend is received. Suppose your company owns more than 50% of another company in Denmark. In that case, it will become the administrator of a joint taxation scheme between the holding company and the company that is owned with more than 50%. The joint taxation scheme is mandatory when the two companies are located in Denmark and shall be registered on Skatteverket within 1 month from the time where the joint taxation starts. You can often opt in to use the joint taxation scheme, even if the companies are located in different countries, but it will make things slightly more complicated. When 2 or more companies have joint taxation, some of the liability in the operating companies is shared with the holding company. And liability even is shared with other operating companies that are also joint taxed with the holding company. So the operating companies need to understand this risk as well. The liability can be either fully shared, if a company is owned 100% by the holding company, or partly shared, if the company is partly owned by the holding company. Can you incorporate a holding company with the same 40,000 Danish krona used to incorporate an operating company? Yes, it is possible to incorporate both companies at the same time, and we call this rolling capital. Can you make a holding company after your operating company is incorporated? Yes, it is also possible to create a holding company after the operating company is incorporated. However, it will make things more complicated, and you will also need to consider tax consequences before transferring personally owned shares in the operating company to the holding company. How to distribute dividends to the shareholder. The distribution of dividends to the shareholder is done either at the annual general meeting or at an extraordinary general meeting. You can read more about the distribution of dividends on daniaaccounting.com. Can your holding company have a different fiscal year than the operating company? In general, you need to make sure that all companies use the same fiscal year. And if 2 or more companies are joint tax, they always need to use the same tax year. In general, it will be the operating company that has to adjust its tax year to match the holding company's tax year. That was all that I wanted to share with you today about holding companies in Denmark. You are always welcome to schedule an online meeting with us on our website daniaaccounting.com, or you can simply call us on +45 70 27 2713. My name is Ida. We are Dania Accounting. Thank you for watching.